And there we are. Hey, let's roll the music. Hello and welcome to TechNow, the podcast that takes a deep technical look into ServiceNow. This is the podcast for ServiceNow administrators and developers. We are happy to have you here with us once again. Hope that you're either watching live on the live stream via Google or Community or wherever it is, or you're watching sometime afterward. That's great too. We want to hear from you. My name is Chuck Tomasi. I'm a platform architect at ServiceNow. Also joining me at the virtual table, I'll let them do their introductions. Go ahead, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Slusher. I am the developer evangelist for the platform business unit, and you can see more of kind of what I'm responsible for and what I do at developer.servicenow.com.
All righty. And Craig joins us once again.
That's right. I'm the orchestration product principal in ITOM, and you can find my work all over the place. I'm kind of spread out like that.
It's like a desk. It's just all in front of them.
Yeah, it's all over the place. I'm omnipresent, just kind of everywhere.
All right, I am going to jump into the screen sharing real quickly for you. We've done our introductions, seen our smiling faces once again. Notice how hairstyles have changed since the last time we were here. Into the infinite hole. And start that wonderful PowerPoint. Crossing the fingers that the Microsoft gods love us today. It should have been mirrored. Are you seeing the presenter screen or are you seeing the presentation?
We see the presentation.
Presentation.
Right. Perfect. I'm sharing the right screen then. Sometimes I get caught by WebEx. All right, we've done our introductions. This episode, we are going to be covering properties pages and tell you all kinds of cool things about properties. Now, we mentioned in episode 12, 14, I forget, it's in here somewhere, about how you can use properties to avoid hard-coding values, but we need a better way to organize them. So we changed the corporate template, if you didn't notice, and the thinking guy is gone. He got promoted. He's now the thinking manager.
If there is such a thing.
Yes, there is. Be nice.
Okay. All right.
Wow. It's going to be one of those shows.
Yeah.
And this is our new talented hire, and she's come into ServiceNow as a developer and wants to know if there's a good way to manage those properties that she recognizes somebody was kind enough to use. And because I had managed my properties, I couldn't resist but throwing a few Monopoly pieces on the slide. So that's what those are
right.
In the upper left under the window. I was going to put a little hotel on each slide, but thought that might be a little overkill. Before we get into the content, yes, this is our last opportunity to remind you there are only, about 17 days, 16 days till Knowledge 16. It's coming up quickly. Everyone on this podcast will be there. We look forward to seeing you. Lots of great opportunities for networking and learning. I saw a gentleman on the community post his schedule. It was unbelievable. The only way he could have had more on that schedule is if he worked for ServiceNow. It was back to back to back to
maybe
back.
Maybe that's what he's angling for.
I said, well, if I don't see you sometime during the conference, he was planning to attend my session, which was like one of the last things at CreatorCon. I said, I'll see you there. Look forward to seeing you. And if you didn't quite make it to Knowledge 16, it's never too early to start thinking about Knowledge 17.
Oh, no, don't say that.
We will be doing a TechNow live from Knowledge 17 with one of my favorite Helsinki features. I'm not going to get into it now. I'm not going to give away any clues.
Just surprise.
But, yeah, Craig and Dave know what it is. And we have a lot of other great things in the pipeline. So stick around. We will be there. Go over to knowledge.servicenow.com and look for the bow tie. It's kind of hard to miss. All right. Before we get started, any questions, gentlemen, or comments about Knowledge?
Where is Knowledge 17 going to be?
I haven't heard.
Oh, I thought it was in Vegas.
It will be on the banner as you walk out of Knowledge 16.
True.
Or you pick up a little chapstick or a or whatever the tchotchkes are at the ServiceNow booth. They always have them for next year with the dates.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And I think it's on the back of your participant guide and in the app. The app should be released soon also. I looked on the Apple App Store yesterday, didn't see it. So I am looking for that. So you can schedule your stuff and socialize and earn points and candy and all that good stuff. Okay, our agenda, we're going to go through a quick properties review, a a few concepts about what we're going to build, and then I'm going to build it right in front of your eyes. This is probably going to be a short one, depending on how much color we want to add to this presentation. You're probably already familiar with the left-hand navigation menu that has properties under knowledge, properties under change management, all of these properties pages, and they display something similar to what you see here. What's the maximum number of articles per content block on a home page? 5. You can change this, and it changes the behavior of the way the application displays. If you want it 3, you want it 5, you want it 7, you want it 12, change the number, hit save, and now it displays a little bit differently. Or do you want to skip part of a process or enable something in a process? You can configure your application to take advantage of these, as we discussed in the earlier TechNow episode, that it avoids hard coding so that somebody says, you know what, I want that 5 to be 7. You don't have to go back to dev, find all the scripts that use that magic number 5 and change it to a 7 and hope it wasn't the wrong number 5. Put them in a property, makes it easy to review. By default, you could do it this way by going to sysunderproperties.list and see the properties, change them, edit them, just like any normal list and record layout that you have used in the past. Very easy to facilitate that way. But there's a better way, because our thinking girl wants to get that nice page layout that you can use. So, real quickly, why would you use a property? Again, avoid hard coding values and make that administration maintenance easier by centralizing all that stuff. This, in turn, of course, lowers your costs and maintenance time on that. How do you do this? Well, you set them in that list that I just showed you, but you can also leverage them and get them into your scripts by using the gs.getProperty call. So if I put gs.getProperty myapp.debug, it will go and get the value of that. There are actually 2 parameters in there. If you specify a second parameter, it says, you know what, the debug value isn't set, so let's make sure we have a default of false, just in case there's no property. It doesn't go, I don't know what you want to do, or set the default to 5 if that property wasn't set. So you can use gs.getProperty, find out more about that. Where can you find more about that, Dave?
At developer.servicenow.com.
Right on cue.
Throw him a bone. So, here's we didn't give this girl a name. I'm going to call her Lisa, just to honor the coordinator behind the scenes that helps bring you this podcast. Lisa's thinking, I want to build a page like that for my applications. They're easy to use, they're easy to build. The main concept is, you've got an application. In this case, we have 3. We have nuts, beers, and bars. And those are the applications do whatever. Yeah.
Speaking of Vegas, I'm just
you know where my mind was when I was writing, right?
That's right.
I try to write non-IT things whenever possible, so it's platform agnostic or industry agnostic. But I think this one has something common. And we've set a bunch of properties. The nuts property uses like the max count, how many fit in a jar, the minimum size, what's the smallest Brazil nut you want to see. You just make up your own use case for this. I just threw a few properties on a few applications. The thing that ties these together and enables us to use the properties page is the category. So we could have 1 or more categories per application. It could be quite simple, like you see the bar application just has a bar category, but the beer application has 2, and it could be 5. I think if you look at some of our applications, some of the properties pages, you will see multiple categories. Even if you're not aware you're seeing them, we'll show you what that looks like. 3 easy steps. We're going to keep this simple for you today. First step, obviously you have I'm going to assume you have the properties already created. So we're going to jump into the next step and say, let's create a properties category. Then link the properties that you already have to that category. Very easy. It's a slush bucket. You just move them around. And then we're going to create a module that calls the sysproperties UI page. And that's the name of it. And you go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That last part sounds like voodoo magic mumbo jumbo to me. Not really. It's actually pretty easy, and I'll show it to you live. The URL is going to look something like this. Sys under properties under UI.do. That, of course, is the UI page that you want to invoke. It knows enough about these other 2 parameters as to how to display that page. You know, I thought about one time making a new one of these, but I never got around to it. Maybe someday. It'd be a fun UI page exercise, wouldn't it?
Sure.
Absolutely.
In all our free time.
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
The next part is sysparm under title, and you can see here it says bar settings. That's what shows up, obviously, on the title of your properties page. I could have called this Norfolk, Virginia, and it would say Norfolk, Virginia, which has nothing to do with the bar settings, but you get the idea. And then the third part is sysparm under category equals bar. It says, remember that category we said in step 1? Go get all the properties related to that category and throw them on here in the order in which I specified. And I am going to show you how to specify that order right now. So let's jump over to, thank you Microsoft for shrinking down my window. Still see my Chrome setting, or did we lose connection again?
No, I see
we
you.
see you. We see you.
I'm happy. Let's hide this little thing that says hide. Okay, I have one of my favorite and longest lasting applications called the loaner request. Loaner request is already built, and it uses some properties, which I will show you. Several of them. It's a scoped application, so it all starts with x_loaner. I have one for check availability, and I think for the first 2 or 3 releases, this is how I expected people to manage their properties until I reverse engineered that properties page and went, oh, is that all there is to it? Now I make properties pages for almost every application. At a minimum, I love these two, logging.verbosity and logging.destination, to control the logging, what's displayed and where it goes on my scoped applications when you do a gs.info or gs.debug call, something to get your debugging information out there. Anyway, I've got several of them. Of course, I can always add new ones. They're in no particular order. So I am going to put them in order. I find the easiest way to do this is just search for categories, and there is system properties, categories. Under system properties, categories, I will create a new category. A loaner request. I could just as easily call this Chuck. It just so happens to be the same name as my application and the title that I'll put on there. Configure the loaner app as you wish. That's what's going to display in the top part of the page. Now I save that page and I get the magic related list down here that says, what properties would you like on this page? I am going to grab all the ones that start with x_loaner and move them over here. And I like my debugging properties at the bottom, so I'll move those around. I've got my time all grouped together, so that looks nice to me. Everything looks pretty good, unless I want to add another one in here, which I could do. Save that, and it orders them 100, 200, 300, 400. Starting to make sense? It's pretty straightforward here. I could create a new property. I believe it always defaults to the number 1 on this list. So just a many-to-many list. You can have properties on multiple categories, and you can have multiple categories on a page. Don't get wound around the axle and overly complex about this. Try to keep your things logically grouped together and give your category a good name so people can figure it out later. If I just call this Chuck, it's going to be tough for somebody to come in later and add another property to this.
No one would understand it. I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Peanut Gallery. All right. That was step 1 and 2. I created the category and I associated things. Yes, Dave?
Well, you're still there. Just go ahead and grab something and put some kind of crazy style, like italicize a word, just to emphasize that
okay.
You have the controls for rich.
We'll make it bold. We'll make it. Where's the color picker? There it is. Background color, text color. We'll make it blue. I like it, and we'll make it bigger.
Bigger.
Right.
Embiggen it. There you go.
Right. So you have the full WYSIWYG editor. So anything, and this is exactly how it'll display in a minute when you show.
Yeah, I've put pictures in here before because it's a loaner app. I put a little calendar icon in there. It worked out real well. So let's save that because we made a change to that record. And there is a try it button. You can try it, and this is how it will look, just like record producers or catalog items. Like, hey, that's pretty cool. That's the actual page. Now, notice this part up here, System Properties UI Do, Category, and it doesn't have a title on it. Oh, it didn't put the title in. Interesting. But that's the first part of what we need. sysproperties category loaner request. Remember that URL I had on the other slide?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to save us all a bunch of pain and suffering by watching me type. And let's go to Studio. I should have created the category via Studio. We'll open up the record, the loaner request app. I also discovered recently this little minus button up here to collapse everything, which makes it a little easier to navigate, in my opinion, when you have a big application. There's my system property category, which I could have and should have created through here. Would have been nice, right? Just giving you a little refresher about Studio. And here are my properties that I already had in existence. So everything is there. Now what I need is that third step for the module. So under navigation, I have an application menu called loaner request. We saw that over here. Maybe I didn't show that to you earlier. Loaner, and it ends with laptops. So I would like to put underneath that a new module to separate the administrative stuff. And your application is going to be whatever you want. That's the cool thing about applications. The type is going to be a separator, and that's all you do for that. And then underneath that, I will put my properties. Whether you want the separator or not, it's an aesthetic thing. Properties order is going to be right after that administrative section. Oh, I missed the roles on the other one. Make sure that you don't give everybody visibility and permission to the properties and probably that administrative section as well. I'll come back and fix that. Actually, you know what? I can do it at the same time, right? Because this is...
It's a tabbed environment.
This is
with its own separate
Studio. We
context.
can do it two at a time. That's right. So I only want people with the admin role to see this page and to see that section of the menu. That's what prevents that. Now, back on the, sorry for jumping around. I'm back on the properties module that I'm creating. Instead of a list of records, it's going to be a URL from arguments, and I paste in the first part of that, system properties UI, system category is this, and sysparm title is loaner request. Now, this part has the URI encoding on it, %20. I could do that here as well. You don't have to. Well, in fact, I'll prove that one way works and one way works. Save that. And lo and behold, refresh my navigator. I now have, let's get to my application. Loaner. You're so far down there. Did I pass it?
You could just type it in the filter.
I know. I should just. It used to appear at the top. I don't know what changed. There's my administration, and there's my properties. So, woohoo on me. If you want, I can go impersonate like Able Tutor or Joe Employee and show you it doesn't work. It doesn't show up for them, but you'll trust me on that. Here's my properties page. Nice blue title, or excuse me, the description. There's the title. And the category that it grabbed had all of these properties that I assigned. I mentioned you can place multiple categories on a page. If you want to do that, I don't need the menu up right now. I need the properties module. You can comma separate the categories. So if I had another one, I wanted to put my bar category.
Oh, that's your title there.
Oh, that's my title. I usually have them in the other order. That doesn't matter either. Categories go, thank you, David. We have multiple categories, and that's displayed on a properties page. See if I can find one real quick for you. Knowledge had multiple categories on its page. Nope. They would show up as a, you'll see the description as a divider.
Yeah, it'll look like a header, like a separator.
Well, but it's under system properties. System properties, because that's got the most in it that I can imagine. System properties. Performance analytics. Boom. There's one category. Chart settings. That's a separate category. So that's how they're displayed, and if you're looking at a properties page, you know that you're looking at, this is actually performance analytics properties. They have a lot of categories. You may choose to do this if you want to logically group them together in a new category. Very easy to do, just comma separate those. So That's about it for the demo. Did you have any questions?
I do not.
All right, then we're going to go back to our presentation. Told you this was going to be a pretty quickly one. We have some best practices because we had lots of questions, and some of these came right out of the community today. I saw the question and I said, you know what, I'm going to answer that on the show. So when I woke up this morning and went, haha, more material, I'm all for that. Best practice 1, use system of properties, as we mentioned before, to avoid those hard-coded values. If you've got magic numbers or magic strings like default assignment groups or maximum number of records to retrieve for a query, try using that gs.get property to set a property. This allows you to change it, hopefully in production, so you don't have to go back to dev, but you can at least test it in dev and test and change it with confidence in production to make sure that your values work. Avoid using these, and this is a question that Craig, I think you had. When should you use them and when should you not, correct?
Yeah, you don't need to, there's some cases where you don't want to use them.
Exactly. And if it's frequently changing data, it might be better served with a lookup table. So if I want to know if I've got this level of risk and I've got this level of impact or urgency or some attributes on the record that are going to generate a default assignment group, such as a routing table, you might be better off with one of our lookup strategies. And I think we have a previous podcast on that as well. If it's a limit that somebody wants to change, if it's that's the most common use case I can think of. A default assignment group, the state for which I'm looking for.
Debugging state, that's another good one.
What's that?
A debugging state, whether you're debugging or not. Yeah.
Right. Do you want to turn this feature on or off? That you can do that with a property. It makes sense. If you want to distribute or share your application, that might be another good use case to put some of those in. Many of those same features can also be used if you want to make your own private table full of values and say, this is my value, this is my, this is my variable, and this is my value. You could do that. Just recognize that your application is going to have to do a glide record lookup every time it accesses that variable or that your pseudo property, I'll call it. System properties that are referenced through the sysproperties table are cached. And I don't want to get too deep into the back end of ServiceNow, but you may be running multiple application servers, which we call nodes. And the cache needs to be flushed if you change the value on a property, which is good and bad, but it is cached. And we do that for performance reasons, so that when you say gs.get property, loaner request default assignment group, it goes, oh yeah, I got that. There's no hit to the database to go get that property.
Yeah,
so
you don't want to put it. You don't want to put one in a while loop and have it incremental update all the time, because then it kind of takes away your advantage of using.
Exactly. If you want, I'm going to throw this out there. It wasn't in a previous slide, but there is a gs.set property. You can change the properties on your own scoped apps, but if you're using a scoped app, you can't change the values on a global property. So be aware that there is some scoping impact with set property. And when you do a set property from a script, it's going to flush that cache, which impacts everybody on that node for just a few seconds. They're going to have to reload some stuff that was previously cached, and that may or may not be noticeable, but I use it with caution. Be aware of who has access to change those properties. You saw me change the role to admin. I may have... Dave, what were we talking about in the rehearsal on Monday?
So it was kind of a follow-on from your point one, which is that if you want to... if you are in a production situation and you want to change this, and the value is in code, it requires an admin. But if you want to have a non-admin user, which is probably how you want to do it, in a live situation.
Yep.
By making this data and not code, now you don't have to be admin to change it. And so that's kind of where you want is so. The kind of the flip side of what you're saying here is being aware is that you can have your application admin can have access while not having admin access to the system, which they would require to go change the literal value in the code.
You can delegate the responsibility of those properties. Just make sure, A, they have access to the module, and B, they have access to the property itself. There is a read role and a write role on every property. So if this application doesn't necessarily have it, I just have a user role. But if I wanted to create an x_loaner.admin role, I would want to make sure that that's applied appropriately to these properties should I want to delegate the modification of those properties.
Right, and that's a very common pattern, right?
Yep.
In your applications that you have, a user, one or a set of user properties and one or a set of admin properties, or roles, and so you would basically segment that so that everyone can read them, only the admins can write them, that sort of thing.
Perfect. As I mentioned before, group them into logical categories: beer, nuts, bars, loaner requests, you name it. If you've got an application, I usually start out with a category named by the application, but if it starts to get a little long, I'd say maybe 10, 15, 20 properties, consider breaking them down into subgroups so that you can put multiple categories on a page. Or maybe you have multiple properties pages. Going too fast now. Give those categories meaningful names. Loaner request is fine. I only have one. If somebody's looking for the properties related to the loaner request, they'll know where to find it. Not too hard there. I'm going to stick this in there. You use scoped apps when possible. Why would I want to do this, Craig, when it comes to properties?
To kind of segment it from all the other system properties.
Yes, the scope becomes part of the property name. So if I create a property called debug on my x_loaner app, and Craig creates a property called debug on his orchestration activity app, we're not going to stomp on each other. It's not, I install Craig's update set and it goes, oh, I've got a debug property. If it's in a scoped app, it protects you from that conflict.
So I have to work harder to stomp on your code.
Well, I mean, just think about the canonical example of this, is always the default assignment group. So it would be easily possible for a dozen applications on your system to all have default assignment groups.
Absolutely.
And so rather than you having to go in and kind of have your own naming convention, underneath it to prevent collision, you use a scoped app that's already happening for you.
That's one of the things I love about scoped apps is just you don't have to think about naming structures too hard. Avoid putting properties for other applications on your page. Well, yes, you can do this. A, the person may not have the role to modify it, and that may or may not be a good thing. And B, it just makes it confusing if somebody's changing it in the properties page A, and I've got it on properties page B as well. It's two ways to access the same value. I don't say don't ever do this, but just be aware of it and usually avoid it. It's not one of the better things you can do in life. When it comes to reference fields, you'll notice that darn near all of those properties were string values, even the Boolean ones. TRUE is a string. I didn't show my script include. Doggone it, I'll have to do that. But if you want to use a reference value or a reference field, let's say I want to make my default assignment group service desk. Rather than putting a sysID into that field, which isn't very readable and could be different from system to system, from dev to test, depending on how that was imported and the record was created, they could have different sysIDs. I can use the literal string service desk and then the method setDisplayValue. Then I go get the property, which is going to return service desk, and says, oh, I'll go do a lookup and get the sysID for that, because the assignment group is a reference field which must contain a sysID. We're getting a little deep into the scripting here. But the key to this is going to be use setDisplayValue if you want to use a string for a reference field. It also means that you need to trust that someone spelled service desk correctly.
I was just thinking that.
And if somebody changes the group name from service desk to help desk or something else, the IT service operations, you're going to need to remember to change the property, or your default assignment group will not work. So somewhere you probably want to put a document together that says these are the properties and why I use them and where they are for. Let's jump back to the instance. I just want to show you how a lot of this was used in the script. Neglected to do that. So back to Studio, and I have a script include under server development where I keep all of my wonderful loaner utils, functions, etc. We'll even blow this up to big screen. The initialize function in this script include, we have a, again, I'm going to reference, I think this is the third backwards reference to TechNow that I've done.
Yeah, just watch the show in reverse order.
We have one on script includes too, where Andrew and I talk all about how wonderful script includes are for development and testing and debugging. Have at it. But my initialize section usually goes and retrieves the properties that I want to use for this. So you can see this .install status or this .check availability is just grabbing the value of a property. Again, check availability is a checkbox. So on the page it represents as a true false as a checkbox, but it's going to come back as a true. I want to turn that into a Boolean value. So that's what this equals true business does. Again, I don't want to get too deep into the scripting, but just recognize that these are string variables. Here's a default value. If somebody doesn't specify a return reminder time, I'm going to make it 24 hours. And up here, I even multiply it by -1 because I'm doing an hours ago function. So you got to be thinking a little backwards. I've even gotten to the point where a lot of the common tables that I use throughout this application are just defined once and only here to say, this is the name of my request table, because I've rewritten this application at least 5 times. This is version 5. And now I'm working on version 6 for Helsinki. We'll have this .request table, and I don't even, every time I see a quote or a magic number, I go, that should really be a constant, maybe not necessarily a property because I'm pulling it from the state table, but at least do yourself a favor and say, out state. You know, put a comment in there so that if you do see magic numbers, you can recognize them. And let me find one of those this something or other. Let's use the search. This dot. Here's this dot overdue remind time. I don't have to remember what script did I use that in, where is it used, how many times did I use it. I can define it once at the top. If you're an old programmer, like you did C programming language once upon a time, this would be equivalent to doing your pound define. Only it's coming from the properties table. Much, much easier to maintain. Again, I've rewritten this so many times that I really focus on that top section. It's like, what's the table name? What are my property names this time? And where do I go from there? Then the other changes are pretty trivial. So that's what it looks like if you're scripting, is gs.getProperty to pull the value, give an optional second parameter if you want a default value, if it's not. And let me find the default group, because I'm going to show you where that set display value is. Default group. There it is once. It says if it's not set, then go get it. Oh, this gets the default assignment group. I'm doing it in a kind of a reverse. I don't know what you call that. That's a different way of doing it. Not what I said I would do. But the other opportunity is, not business rules. If I go to the data model, tables, and open up the loaner request, guess what I can set there for the assignment group? I could set a default value right here. What's the danger in doing this right here? A, I don't have security to it. Why is that? Anybody? Bueller? What's my scope?
Your scope is the application.
Yeah. Scope is the application. Where does the assignment group come from?
Task.
Which is global. So I would need to do a what? A dictionary override for the default value. And I could just as easily put in here the sysid, or I could do JavaScript, gs.getProperty, x loaner, default assignment group. That will pull out the property and put it in here for me. Oh, wait, no, it won't. Why is that?
Because you've got a dot rather than an underscore between default and assignment.
No, that's correct. What is the value that I said goes in properties?
Oh, yeah, you've got the display value there rather than the sysid.
Yes, that would be the display value. So this one is going to be a little wonky. Can't really use it all that well here. What I could do, even better, let's leave that page, go back to my table.
You could use the value that came out of your loaner util script include.
My loaner utils, I could do a new get value and pile it all in there. Let's go to the item type. It's easier. I need my columns turned on here. Where's my column name? I can't drive without column names for some reason. Sort by that, and now I have, go to page 2, apologize for scrolling up and down. I figure we had a few extra minutes, we'll give them. Okay, see how this default value is hard-coded in here, into the default field? I added in version 6, and I'll probably retrofit this to version 5 before it's released, hopefully in the next week. I had added a property for the default depot. This comes from a choice list, so I know the value of it. I could put in here, gs.getProperty, get property, x loaner default depot. And that will allow me to set that from a property. Now, I throw that on the properties page, and if I distribute this application to somebody, I say, oh, don't forget, look at the properties page, set your default depot, set your default item type, and away we go. Because the default assignment group is already on there, and I've got a method to set that already. So just making it easier to maintain later. Yeah, that's a little harder than typing Chicago, and maybe this project never leaves my company, but somebody somewhere is going to say, oh, we closed the office in Chicago, why are we still automatically assigning things there? And you're going to have to go look in the dictionary? Not me, buddy. I'd rather go to the properties page and go, oh yeah, here we go. Let's put it on a properties page and make it easier for somebody to maintain later.
Well, I think that's a very common pattern in, anytime you support, let's say, an application that lives longer than you expected it to, think like
all of them.
Yeah. So, that is, this happened to every one of us on this call, and probably most of us in this career, is that at some point you're going and trying to figure out where is this value coming from.
I've never.
So having the pattern be it's in a property, as opposed to distributed throughout the code and throughout, do you want to have to look at the default value of every single table in your application to verify that that nothing has changed? No one does. So.
Not me. All right, let's see if PowerPoint has anything else for us to say.
And then just one more thought on your script include. So everything we've talked about up to this point has been about kind of isolating and kind of making the system, isolating the application admin from having to make the changes in code by using your pattern of the script include. You're now isolating the other elements of the script from having to even know the name of the property. So you give yourself a nice logical API so that you don't even it's still being driven by the gs.getProperty, but now you don't even have to know the arcana of what the actual name is. You just have to know kind of what the thing is.
Right.
And although it doesn't work this way today, I think eventually on the roadmap, the way we've got the new code completion in the scripting boxes, at some point in the future, I do believe it's going to start auto-completing from script includes and other elements on the system. So at the point where that exists, you could actually get your loaner utils dot, and you could then at that point get code completion. So again, that's kind of a future, vaporware at this time, but I know that was on the roadmap at one point.
Something else I wanted to show you too. If you were talking about the API and it triggered something. I've got my loaner properties here, and I say, you know what? Chuck uses this thing called whether or not we want to check the availability, do conflict checking. You can right-click on there and edit the property or copy the name to the clipboard. So you're never want for what does this actually do? If you want to go search it out, you can hover over this thing and it'll say, oh, this is X loaner check availability. And then, of course, what's Dave's favorite feature? Code search.
Absolutely.
X loaner check availability. Should have copied that, but I did not. Now I'm questioning my underscore. It says, yep, there it is in one script include and one business rule. So, hoorah.
That's nice.
Makes it easy to understand somebody else's code, which all of us have struggled with in the past as well.
It doesn't have to be somebody else's code. It could be any code from yourself more than 3 months ago is effectively someone else's code.
That's true, because ServiceNow years are like dog years. Anything I did 2 months ago. Might as well have been 2 years ago.
That's right.
Okay, we already did all this slide. Let's just go on. Licensing considerations, my favorite part. It's free. It comes with the platform. Everything we've shown you here today is yours to do with. It doesn't cost anything extra. Studio, property, script includes. I like dealing in the public domain whenever possible. And reference information, it was episode 14, not 12, that I referenced for the TechNow video. And of course, product documentation is available on the wiki. We have a best practices page around system properties, and the video that's embedded in there is me walking you through that same demo and discussing what good they're for. So it's sort of a consolidated.
Is that one of those videos where you go, "Hi there, I'm Chuck Tomasi."
Yeah, I think that was the one I filmed at my old house.
At your old house.
It could have been the first one I did in this house. Like,
oh,
"Hi,
I didn't notice you there."
ServiceNow, here to talk to you about system properties best practices. But we just did that, so I won't do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So our takeaway, if you haven't already heard it 1,800 times, is they're easy to build, they make your application easier to manage, and they provide a professional appearance to your application. So give yourself a pat on the back for using that. If you want to get in touch with us, multiple ways. You can follow us on the community. Dave Slusher, Chuck Tomasi, Craig Stepp. Until this morning, I was Charles Tomasi. Thank you, Lisa, for changing that over for me. I thought maybe my driver's license had been processed somehow. And many other ways. Now Community, if you want to follow us on Twitter, or ServiceNow, or Now Support, I think is the other one. I should change that. And this will eventually end up on the Now Support channel. Do we have any questions other than the one from Kevin that I had alluded to earlier?
I don't see any on the Q&A portion of the Google
Okay.
Hang. But let's go make sure that we check the community.
And I will make sure that I did, in fact, capture all of Kevin's comments.
All right, and while we're running those down, how about I'm going to plug my session, my individual sessions at Knowledge.
Oh, there you go.
On Tuesday. I actually have an extremely full day on Tuesday in every lab slot where I'm doing 2 runnings of Integration 301, all about scripted REST APIs, which I talked about two shows ago. I'm also the co-presenter on Integration 202, and then Wednesday I'm doing another running of Integration 202, and on Thursday, as part of CreatorCon, I'll be doing a session on automated testing. So
nice.
If you are a nerd for automated testing the way I am a nerd for automated testing, come and join me, because I figured out some stuff that is arcane and currently unrepresented in our documentation that we're trying to get some information out in the world. So it should be very, very cool.
Hey, I'll plug myself too. If you use any lab instance at Knowledge, I had something to do with it.
Yeah, put your head down and say a little prayer every time you walk up to a ServiceNow instance. If it says .lab.servicenow.com, say, "Thank you, Craig, for bringing me this instance. May it work as expected."
We'll sprinkle a little holy water on it. No, don't do that.
No, don't sprinkle holy water. We've already tried that. It doesn't work so well. That was last year.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple sessions. The Source Control Lab, which is at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, it's like right after the keynote, would be with Chris Malloy. We're going to co-present on one of the newest, coolest features that I think for developers in ServiceNow Helsinki release. And then you'll find me doing Lab Guru. They'll also be hanging around the Hack Labs, which actually are available. CreatorCon sort of bled over onto the Knowledge Conference, because you can walk up to the Hack Zone and do hands-on self-paced labs. I've written a couple of those, one on condition fields, which I should just get a bell. We have a previous TechNow for. I think that was episode 12. I could be wrong. And then I've got another one on how to use script fields in your application, which is kind of cool. So if you want to walk through that. And those labs actually use source control for their collateral. So you will have take-homes, and you can catch up. If you screw up Lab 1, fast forward and get onto Lab 2. That's a new feature we're introducing this year into some of the labs. So look for that. That was my harebrained idea for how to use source control at Knowledge. And then I have a second presentation, like I said, last thing on Friday, with adding a change management system to a third-party application at CreatorCon. So it's going to be a busy one. It's going to be fun. We look forward to seeing you there. If you're watching this after Knowledge, hey, there's always next year. Go to knowledge.servicenow.com to find out more and get signed up. And enough of the commercial. Any parting words, gentlemen?
Nope. Thanks for being a part of it, and thanks for watching. And as always, was a pleasure.
Yeah, look for us at Knowledge. We'll be floating around.
We'll see you there. Go build something cool now.
That's right.
And we'll see you on the community. Take care. Bye.